What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Borderlands 2 video. Now, in the comments of the last couple videos, I was asked to go over how different the characters feel after the recent patch to Borderlands 2. Really, the only two characters that have notable fixes to them are Gaige and Maya. So of course, since he's my favorite and all, I'll be going over Gaige first in this video. Now, in the past, it seemed that most of Gearbox's balancing revolved around TVHM and not UVHM or the OP levels, so I'll be going over how the fixes affect both Gaige's performance in OP8 and TVHM. As far as the skills go, the only ones that received noticeable fixes were Death from Above, Intersperse Outburst, and Shockstorm. On top of that, there were fixes to dot damage as well, so let's go ahead and go over them. Let's start out with Intersperse Outburst first. According to a post from the forums that is linked below in the description, by the way, Intersperse Outburst received around a 244% damage buff. Now, this sounds pretty awesome, right? Well, considering how little 5 stacks of the skill did to an OP8 enemy before, it isn't a very huge increase. However, it is reasonably noticeable. You can see here that 5 stacks do a decent amount to low tier enemies like Psychos, and a smaller amount to enemies like Nomads and Marauders. So the damage still isn't really that substantial at all, which is pretty disappointing. I used the Grog nozzle here in this footage because it was low damage, and it would do a better job of showing how much damage the skill itself would do. The damage itself doesn't make the skill worth it, but I've always said that the chance to slag enemies gave it its worth, and it still does. 5 points in the skill give a rather high chance to slag an enemy with 5 stacks, and 11 points basically seemed like 5 stacks would always slag the target. The skill's worth is ultimately up to you though. I recommend it, but I don't recommend anything more than 5 points into the skill if you do go for it. It's not really worth having a class mod that won't really help you just to buff up this one skill. As for TVHM, 11 points in the skill made it so 5 stacks basically killed Marauders outright, and beefier enemies took a large amount of damage. I used the Ruby here instead of the Grog, but you can clearly see how much damage the Ruby does before you can see how much damage Intersperse Outburst does, and it does do pretty much most of the damage. Moving on to Death from Above. This skill has always been pretty horrible, but according to the same forum post, it also gained around a 244% damage increase. Now with 11 points in the skill, it does a large amount to smaller enemies like Psychos, and to regular size enemies like Nomads, it does a small amount. The skill also suffers from one of the same bugs it has always suffered from. It's supposed to only consume stacks and activate when in midair, but it can activate while you're taking damage, since the slightest knockback makes the game think you're in midair. So is it worth it in OP8? Absolutely not. As for TVHM, it actually does a large amount of damage to targets, taking off most of their health or straight up killing them with one blast. It can even kill multiple enemies if they're close enough. Promise you there's no pun there. Is the skill worth it in true alternate mode though? It's up to you, but in my opinion, having a large amount of stacks is much better for damage than having a skill that consumes stacks and can even do so at random. On to the last skill, Shockstorm. While I have no exact numbers for this skill's buff, it is noticeable. In OP8, it is capable of killing multiple smaller enemies if they're close enough, but doesn't really do much to the beefier enemies. Is it worth using? Well, in my experience, I barely ever got it to kill other smaller enemies because they almost never grouped up. Enemies in this game move around pretty erratically. Getting footage for the skill was actually really aggravating, and I didn't even get good footage. It can be useful, but it won't be very consistent. Now in TVHM, it actually does the same thing. Kill smaller enemies, doesn't do much to beefier ones. So same thing goes for TVHM as well. That's it for her skills. Let's talk about her dot. I'll tell you right now, the fixes are much more noticeable in OP8 than TVHM. It seems as if TVHM wasn't really affected at all, so we're gonna focus on OP8. I was running basically every elemental status effect skill Gaige has in this footage, and when the enemy was slagged, electrical burn and even the electric damage itself to some extent was doing pretty well. On enemies that weren't badasses, the dots were pretty much killing them faster than they could regen, which is definitely not how it was like before. As for the badasses themselves, the dots were actually able to keep them from regenerating their health at all. Is it the perfect balance that we all wanted? Not quite, no, but I'll admit the dots do feel very useful now, at least compared to how useful they felt before. Gaige was, and technically still is, all about direct damage, but now her dots can hold their own as well. Now, is Gaige any more viable than she was before? Not incredibly, but she most definitely got some help. These fixes don't put her over any of the other characters that she wasn't already over before, but Gaige players will definitely feel a bit stronger, at least in the dot category. As a Gaige player, I do think a lot more could have been done to her as far as balancing goes. I'm not going to go into specifics because we'd all be here for hours, but I would have definitely given a lot of her skills a huge boost, and maybe have even messed with how some work entirely. This is a pretty broken game though, so there's only so much that can realistically be done, especially this late into the game's life cycle, or, death cycle, whatever you want to call it. Nevertheless, I'm glad Gaige got a bit of a revamp. And that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Maya's video will be tomorrow. I'm sure most of you are more concerned with her than Gaige. Anyway, so I left the best for last, at least according to you guys, because I still think Gaige is the best in the world. But anyway, thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it, and I'm going to see you guys later. Bye.